Hello, this is Suzanne Nobles. Nice to see you all out there, here to talk about my final paper. I am focusing on the tension between authors and the public domain. This tension, while seemingly new because of digital tools that encourage and extend open access, is actually rooted deep in the history of copyright. I am going to be using the copyright issues that happened in the 2012 AP English exam as a current case study that exposes both the historical roots and the current issues in what I will then propose only seems to be a conflict between authors and the public domain. This case study will ultimately uncover possible solutions for protecting both the author and the public domain to find that middle ground, which our recent discussions in class have focused on. In order to uncover these solutions, I'm going to walk through 3 steps. The first will be my assumption that I am basing my paper on that the public domain is worth protecting and nurturing. Then a brief review of how the historical roots of copyright law, as well as current copyright laws, are aimed at protecting the publisher and author rather than the public domain. And then a shift into the actual case study of the 2012 AP exam. This case study will expose 2 aspects of the issues. One will be the fair use clause in the pre-digital world, and then we will move, I know the fair use clause still exists now, but in my example it will not be involved with digital. Then we'll move into the open access via digital means issue, a field that has not been fully legislated and therefore offers us options for molding something that works for both authors and the public. That's where our possibilities will come from. So let me start back at the beginning. So my opening assumption is that the public domain is important and worth protecting and nurturing. I'll be building on both Hall and Lessig in this section, and I want to begin here with just Hall's definition of open access because it's important to understand the digital focus that I am using with open access. So on page 3, he defines open access as access that is digital, online, and free of charge to those able to connect to the internet without having to pay subscriptions either to publish or to pay per view. So that has 2 real benefits, that access of the public domain. The first is economic, that it is simply cheaper to publish information this way digitally, and so therefore is something that could be provided open because the publishers are at less risk of recouping their money, and so there's an economic benefit. But the second is really an intellectual and social benefit, which I find even greater than the economic one, in that because we can put out information at a low cost, more information will be able to be put out there, and it will not be based on market value of economics, but instead on intellectual value and quality. Now, there are issues with kind of running through what is valuable or not, and I will get into that later in my paper, but I just wanted to lay out really the benefits I see economically and socially. And so the risk of infringing on such open access is that we risk losing new, cutting edge, not popular where it's going to sell information and cultural development if we restrict open access. So my second point will then be to review how we got where we are and about how copyright law historically and still currently really favors the author and the publisher versus the public domain. Patterson and Rose taught us way back the first couple weeks of class about how what was originally to protect the economic interests of the publishers morphed into those of the author, which we discussed last week as well about who that author really is. Current copyright laws have just extended that to even further detriment of the public domain. The Sonny Bono extension in '98, up to 95 years after publication, it's still under copyright. The Digital Millennium Copyright Act, also in '98, heightened the penalties for copyright infringement. So there's been this closing in of protection to that author or that publisher. So we now sit at the confluence of these 2 pressures. Legal pressure focused on the economic protection of publishers and authors against access pressures, people wanting that information and wanting to be able to further develop their ideas in this open exchange. So the 2012 AP English exam actually became a microcosm of these pressures. It placed in tension with each other utilitarian theories and social planning theories, as well as open access versus the author protection. In May 2012, the students sitting for the AP English exam wrote essays on a passage from Under the Feet of Jesus by Helena Maria Viramontes. That, unlike prior years when all essay questions were released, this question was not, and it was said that it would be released with a practice exam in the fall. In the fall, that never materialized. And instead, it was shown that Viramontes did not give copyright permission to have the exam question published. So, my first paper examined really the economic theory tension behind this, really looking at how Viramontes and the College Board put ahead of any social planning goals of providing a teaching material for students and teachers, put their own economic interests. And they dealt with the case involving the heart of the book, the Supreme Court case involving Nation v. Ford. So I will explore that. I'm not going to go into that here because I'm supposed to be focusing on my new material now. So ultimately, in that paper, what I saw is that this precedent for utilitarian over social planning goals didn't really help at all in the social planning and really is limiting fair use. It's an educational use of that text, but it wasn't given to the educational use because of these utilitarian goals. So I'm wondering if the middle ground can be reached that satisfies those economic needs as well as those social needs. So this brings us into the digital world. The literary agent of Viramontes had a second worry, which is that if they put the passage on the internet, which is where the College Board was going to put it, that Viramontes would lose control. What I will argue in my paper is that this fear of digital was simply a straw man at the root of a seeming conflict between authors and the public domain, because there actually are possible solutions versus simply just saying no to the public domain. Viramontes, Bernstein, and even the College Board just said, no, we're just not going to worry about it. We're just going to focus on our economic interests. But instead, we can try to reconcile economic self-interest with the public domain, and we can try to meet both. So, in my solutions, I'm going to look at the reality of the lower cost of digital publishing. Lessig talks about this, the music industry, Napster. It is very hard to say today that an author should only put their book out in print because it's so much cheaper to put it out digitally. Publishers don't have as much risk. People could maybe buy it for less, but people worry that they're going to lose control. So I will then move into examples of where it actually makes good economic sense to do this, that it is good economic sense to be digital because otherwise people don't find your work. Neil Gaiman will be one of my biggest examples there of his web presence driving his book sales and how he actually increases his sales because of his web presence. I then would like to explore the patronage system that Hall brings up like it is in academia, and that if you offer money to support authors in a squared off way, in a way that says for this period of time you'll have economic means, that will allow creativity to generate, but it will then allow the works created to become more part of the public domain and not an author's livelihood. Dr. Rowe brought this up in our discussions, and as I said, Hall discusses it and makes some very good points that publishers can be more open to putting works out when there isn't that economic ding worry. So I'm still fleshing out my possibilities, but ultimately my goal will be to look at how the AP English case could have been solved differently and how that can lead us to a possible solution of how to provide authors and publishers the economic means that they deserve, as well as preserving the public domain. So I hope that will be interesting to people, and thank you very much for listening, and I will see you all online.